Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Hockey Royalty Podcast, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. I am Joe Paterino, filling in once again for my man Randon McMahon. I do have Russell Morgan. Don't you worry, folks. Russell is here to start the show. He's here. He's in the house. Today, we are going to be talking about, we got some LA Kings that are going to be making an appearance in the World Championships. We're going to recap the forwards in this particular episode, kind of talk about what we saw from the forwards this past season, forwards that we were excited about, forwards that maybe we need a little bit more from, and then we'll look ahead into next season. So stick around, find out, join in on the chat. Let's have some fun. Okay, Russ, that was probably my best Randon McMahon impression that I could do.
You did good. That was really good. I mean, I don't know if I've ever done a cold open like that before, but you were excellent, my friend.
No script, just
off the cuff.
Yeah. See how we do it, right? Awesome.
I think you got a career in your future.
yeah. We'll see about that. How you doing? How's things?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah, it's just taking in some playoff hockey still. Round 2 sure has been kind of a bore, huh?
Yes.
But yeah, besides that, life's good. How about yourself?
Russ, I'm not a handy guy.
Okay.
Right? Not at all. And I was told by numerous people, you eventually get married, you have a house, you have kids, you're going to become handy. I tell you right now, I don't know how many things I've put together over these. I'll be married 6 years next month. I mean, I'm putting all sorts of stuff together. Toys, desks, dressers, bookcases, you name it. Took me about 4 hours today to put together a patio set after work. And let me tell you, that was way more work than I expected it to be. So needless to say, I'm looking forward to kind of setting that aside. That's over with. Let's talk a little bit of hockey because I'm all set with that.
They always say it's going to be like an hour or so, then it turns into a full day thing, huh?
It's not an hour. And I love the there's like reviews or whatever, or even in the pamphlet, it's like, oh, this is, difficulty, easy. Like it may
ages 5 to 12.
Yeah, I don't think so. So let's get right into it, Russ. So World Championships, they are taking place in Finland, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they are taking place here shortly. And we have some LA Kings that are going to be representing some various countries. So for Sweden, Carl Grundstrom is going to be making an appearance. And for Team USA, the Ontario Reigns, TJ Tynan, and regretfully, the Ontario Reigns Cal Peterson are.
I was wondering why you're going to spin that one.
Representing the United States of America. And I think, did I miss anybody? Those are the ones that I've got. Did I miss somebody?
Martin Chromiak.
Oh,
for Slovakia.
There we go.
Another Ontario guy, but nonetheless, Kings guy.
So thoughts on, I guess the World Championships kind of as a whole. I feel like the World Juniors is the really big buzzy tournament more so than the championships, but thoughts on the tournament and thoughts on the representation from the LA Kings organization.
This tournament's always so weird because I feel like in North America this tournament doesn't get a lot of play, of course, because the NHL playoffs are going on. A lot of the focus from hockey's perspective is on that, but you kind of like, I watched some of the exhibition of the USA game in Germany. I think it was in Germany. They were playing Germany, so I'm guessing that's where it was. That building was packed. I mean, it's insane how much Europe just loves this competition. I don't know if maybe it doesn't coincide with their playoffs. Like, I know some of the European countries have their own individual leagues, and maybe their leagues are done. So maybe they can focus a little bit more on this competition, and that's certainly what kind of looks like. So I think you get a lot of players and maybe more of the younger players that kind of go to it. You kind of see maybe it's more of experience, kind of grow a little bit of confidence from this. We saw Gabe Vilardi go to one of these. I mean, Cal Peterson, I don't know if it really helped him really, but he was voted the best goaltender at the World Championships just 2 years ago. So, I mean, from that kind of perspective, it's good in terms of development. you still see some veteran players go over. Like Tyler Toffoli is the captain of Team Canada, and Milan
Mm-hmm.
Lucic is right there with him. So you still kind of get that mix. But I think it's good to see players that maybe need to get a little bit more playing time under their belt get that playing time in this kind of stage. I mean, especially a player like Martin Chromiak, who maybe didn't really play as much throughout the year and was dealing with some injuries himself, some illness. TJ Tynan always going to be playing. That guy's a motor. He's just going to constantly be playing. So good to see him. Carl Grunstrom, that's another good name. I'm glad I went over there because he can maybe make a little bit of noise playing some important games. And I was hoping to see Rasmus Kupari on Team Finland.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of surprised I didn't see that name. But then I guess the big name in the room that everyone's looking forward to is Cal Peterson. And man, I don't know if you saw the first showing, but I watched that. I watched the exhibition game because I wanted to see if he would come in. And sure enough, I think DeSmith started for USA. Looked pretty good. And then Peterson came in with like 8 minutes to go in the second period. And the second period was okay for him. Didn't really face too much. I mean, it's Germany in an exhibition game for the World Championships. So it's nothing too pressure really, but or too much pressure. But man, that third period, he didn't look too good. We saw a lot of the same Cal Peterson that we had seen throughout the season. And yeah, there was just that one goal that I know you saw as well.
Yep.
That was I don't want to say it was a howitzer of a one-timer, but it was just a one-timer that was right along the ice that just went right through his legs, and just the typical Cal Peterson we've seen throughout the year.
It wasn't a howitzer, Russ. And if you probably noticed, for anybody watching on YouTube, I'm keeping
Let's
this
put it like
comment up from Dave O. Looking forward to seeing some more highlights instead of Cal giving up horrible goals in the exhibition. Listen. I don't want to hammer the kid, right? I don't want to get too hard on Cal Peterson, okay? Because I understand. Listen, he doesn't want to play poorly. He wants to play well. He has a history of being a good goaltender, dating back to college, his early pro days, etc. Clearly, something is wrong here, and it just was not a good start. It was very reminiscent of preseason, frankly, right?
Same thing.
I thought back to some of the goals he gave up in preseason. It's like, man, just his feet aren't. And again, as I've said a million times before, if you listen, not a goalie expert, always hesitate when it comes time to talk about the technical stuff of the goaltenders, but just feet don't look set. Goals beating him along the ice, boy, that's just it's just tough to see. So I hope he can turn it around. And it's funny you mentioned he was voted the best goal in the tournament, right? There was an interview, Spittin' Chicklets, Robin Lehner, a couple years back. He thought Cal Peterson was like a legitimate, he's one of the best goalies in the league. So I don't know what happened here and where this fall off happened or where it came from, if it's between the ears or what. But
It's I mean, it's I'd love to do a deep dive into like the mental aspect of goaltenders, but it certainly seems like, and yeah, we don't want to keep hounding him, but when you get paid the amount of money you're paid, that Cal Peterson is being paid, he deserves criticism. That's just where we're at. I mean, he was given the keys to the kingdom to be the number one goalie for the LA Kings going forward once Jonathan Quick was gone. And it feels like, and I think I heard inside the NBA guys talking about this about with some NBA players about how, I think they mentioned this with Jordan Poole, because the Lakers are going with between the Warriors and a playoff series right now. They were talking about how when players just start playing differently once they get the paycheck. And I'm not going to say this is what's going on with Cal, but you put two and two together, that certainly seems to be the case. I mean, I'm not sure. It's just he gets the money, he gets the paycheck, and now all of a sudden things start falling apart, and you kind of just hope and want to see him become the starting goaltender, because of course you look at the salary cap, and this is where the Kings are at in the situation. Where I wrote an article saying, man, if they could figure out a way to trade him, I mean, that's would be the number one benefit for the Kings in the offseason. But that's kind of where we're at, because man, Kings fans don't want to see a goaltending tandem of Copley and Peterson to start the year, and I don't blame them. I'm kind of right there.
The timing does line up pretty well with the signing of the contract. And I hate to, want to speculate and get into the brain of a guy or the mind of a guy. And listen, obviously, I hope he turns it around, whether it's with the LA Kings organization or it's elsewhere.
Yeah.
You don't want to see a kid struggle the way he has. I mean, you can just sense that he's just lost right now. So I hope he finds it. And Russ, listen, he's an LA King goaltender right now. So there's hopefully he does for that reason in and of itself.
Well, it's funny because it sounds like he's doing pretty well, like in the locker room, like in terms of camaraderie with the guys. I read USA Hockey puts out like a daily report of each day, and I read today's report, and apparently Cal Peterson is the locker room DJ, and
Okay.
he has like 11 hours of a country music playlist that he plays during practice. I'm not a big country music guy, so I don't know if I'd be on board with listening to country music while I'm practicing, but I mean, to each their own. Some people are big fans of the country music scene out there, so it is what it is. So it's good to hear that he's still got that presence in the locker room, that fun, lighthearted presence, I guess.
That is a good thing, because you don't want it to be so for the word I'm looking for, I'm not even going to try it at this point. It just messes with him so much mentally that he can't like be himself. You certainly don't want that. So, Shake Master coming in the chat. What's up, guys? Let's talk some hockey. Absolutely. Davo, you're chiming in again. The Canes just won. Yes, they did. They're on to round 2, knocking off my Devils. It was a good run. Kings
Who
rule.
scored for the Kings?
I don't know. It was a shot from the point on the power play. I don't recall if it was tipped or not, so I'm not sure. But it was a power play goal in overtime. Hey, guys, good to see you. Good to see you, Kings rule. Thanks for coming in the chat. Not too much to add there, Russ, I would say. On the World Championships, I would say Chromiak. I'm very interested in seeing how he does, no question. Yeah. Grunstrom, it's just about ice time. Just get as much skating and ice time as you can get. I love TJ Tynan. I absolutely love him, doing a lot of rain coverage in the Making It Rain podcast last season with Rando. I mean, just a remarkable player. His work ethic and just his incredible skill. I just love it that he's over there. I love that he's playing there. I don't know that he's ever going to be an NHL player, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's gotten some NHL games under his belt. He's been a dominant AHL player in his career. So good on him. Not a lot of people do that anyway. So he's getting an opportunity to play for the United States in the World Championship. So I love that. I loved watching TJ Tynan play.
It's funny. He's playing on a line with Connor Garland.
I saw that.
It's like almost like his NHL, twin
perfect.
Almost. But it's funny. Yeah, I mean, TJ Tynan is just one of those. I remember people ask me why can't TJ Tynan just play in the NHL? Like, why don't they bring him up? And you always see these guys that just go crazy in the AHL. I mean, Elias Anderson had 30 goals this past season for the Reign. I mean, I'm not going to write off his NHL career, but it's just for some reason, guys just like they excel so well in the AHL, but they just really can't put it together in the NHL. And this is not a knock on Tynan. I mean, excellent player. I remember having a conversation with Jared Shaffrin, who's the Reign insider, and he said that I guess for a couple games there, a couple practices there, he was like staying after practice like 30 minutes or so because there were 2 games where he didn't have a point. So he needed to have a little bit more extra work because for him that's just subpar for him. But yeah, I'm glad you did mention Martin Chromiak because it's kind of looking at the Slovakian roster. There's not a lot of big names or even really any names that I recognize in terms of NHL talent. So I would expect Chromiak to be like one of the main headliners in terms of looking for someone who's going to score goals for that team. So it's going to be a player that I'm definitely going to be watching. They play their first game tomorrow morning, Friday morning, if you guys are not watching or listening on Friday. So I think USA opens against Finland too. So, I mean, World Championships, they're just fun hockey. It's a great tournament and should be fun again this year.
So the talk of Tynan and Chromiak kind of as a decent little transition to kind of the main point of the show today is going to be forwards for the LA Kings this past season. And before we get into standout forwards for the LA Kings, then that we'll talk about, just real quick on Chromiak. So his first year here, Russ, 55 games. He's got 15 goals, known as a sniper, known as a shooter, right? Yeah. 28 points in those 55 games. He did have 5 power play goals. Not to say that I don't know how much of the Reign that you watched this season, and maybe this is a question for Kyle Garcia. How would you rate Chromiak from what you saw, from what you heard, talked to, read, etc. Martin Chromiak's season? Because I think this was a pretty boy. There was a lot of people. It was hype in Kingsland around Chromiak, and there rightfully so, and there still should be, frankly, coming into the season. So how do you think this season kind of went for Chromiak?
Well, the hype was built around because in juniors he was playing for Kingston, and he played on the line with Shane Wright and Lucas Edmonds. Lucas Edmonds was a mid-round pick from the Lightning. I really wanted the Kings to draft Edmonds. I mean, I think he's going to be a good player too. But to Chromiak, yeah, all the hype was there. I think he finished with 40 goals in his last year at juniors. And I was so excited to see him play in that summer World Junior tournament. But then he dealt with some illness, lost a lot of weight. And I think that illness kind of carried him into the start of his season in Ontario. And that's kind of why we didn't really see him in the lineup too often. And yeah, we'll have to bring Kyle on here to talk a little bit more about him maybe later on. But yeah, it was a little slow start for him. But then I think once he got a little bit more comfortable, he started picking up a little bit. But I think that, and then once the season kind of, he kind of slowed down a little bit toward the end of the season. But he was a kid coming right out of juniors, first pro season.
Yep.
I'm like I said, I'm really happy to see what he can do in this championship. I'm not expecting him to just blow up, but for a team like Slovakia that's going to be looking for goal scoring, I mean, there's nothing better that you can do is look for a player like Martin Chromiak, who was pretty much the primary. He was like Team Slovakia is like Alex Ovechkin on their first power play unit at the World Juniors. He was just sitting there waiting for one-timers because this guy can laser the puck. So I'm really excited to see what he can bring. And I think he'll get a lot of ice time with that team too.
I think Chromiak's a pretty good reminder that the big years in juniors, all this stuff, like it can take these guys some time, right?
Yeah.
Like Pinelli's going to be another example of this probably next season. Like I wouldn't expect Pinelli. I'm excited. I'm really excited about him. He's coming off a real big year. I'm not expecting Pinelli to come and be a point game guy in the AHL. Like these guys, with the exception of your top 5, top 10, top 20 picks, unless you're the Kings, these guys generally kind of
we're seeing it with Arthur Kaliev right now, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, Sammy Fagimo is another one, really, where he's turned into he's a pretty good goal scorer. He's proven himself to be a pretty good goal scorer in the AHL, but he's kind of in that in between right now. Is he ready to take that next step? So, just as the kind of off season hype, and it's easy to get sucked into that because it's the off season, and you look at the stats from the prior year in their OHL season, you get real excited. But it's you never know. There's some of these guys do take some time, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Mm-hmm. So before we do get into the forwards, we're going to talk about our sponsor over at DraftKings. Light the lamp during the hockey playoffs with DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can make a $5 bet and score $150 in bonus bets instantly. Do you want to bet? There's a couple of game 5s tomorrow. You want to bet the Toronto Maple Leafs minus 170 at DraftKings right now to get back into this series a little bit? You can do that. Game 5 in Vegas, Edmonton Oilers, they're road favorites at minus 130 at DraftKings. You can hop in on that too, depending on how you see that one's going, with a couple of suspensions to D-men. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now and sign up with the code THPN. New customers can make a $5 hockey playoff bet and score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Okay, Russ.
You were excellent at that too.
Oh, thank you, sir. Forwards. Let's go. I put standout forwards here. So how about if you have one or two guys that maybe, well, I guess we can say that they exceeded your expectations. How about we do that coming into the season? And if there's anybody else that you think was like right along the lines there, feel free to throw them out there, and we'll have maybe a little bit of a discussion, see what the folks in the chat think. Hop on in. For anybody that is in the chat, like, subscribe. We always appreciate that support. So, Russ, go ahead.
I think I might go with a pretty easy one, maybe a little slam dunk here, but I think this player exceeded my expectations. When the move was made, I wasn't really as excited as I probably should have been, but I'm going to go with Kevin Fiala. And I remember when the rumors were circulating that Kevin Fiala was available, um, I was on the fence on it, and maybe this is more because I didn't really know too much about the player. You kind of look at the stats, and yeah, he was great last year or I guess the year before for the Wild, putting up 85 points in 82 games. But besides that, he really kind of fluctuated between 50, 40 points. So we hadn't really had that blow up year. So that last year with the Wild was really his breakout season, I guess you could say. But man, I mean, just straight off at training camp, you watch this guy skate, and it was just like, man, I don't know, like why this guy isn't considered a star in the NHL. I mean, he's legitimately probably a top 10 winger, probably. I would say, even maybe probably more at even strength because but we saw him even excel during the power play too. But man, he comes in, and if it weren't for the injury, that freaking Andrew Cogliano, I swear, if it weren't for Andrew Cogliano's knee on knee, I mean, he would have had a career year. He was 72 points in 69 games. It's just God, I hate that play so much. But yeah, I mean, for Kevin Fiala to come in and have that really just solid year where he's just the primary, he's doing exactly what the Kings brought him in to do. I mean, he's not going to play solid two-way defense. That's not what he's here for. He's going to be a dynamic offensive playmaker / scorer, and that's exactly what he was. So for Rob Blake to kind of make that splash, to grab a player, I mean, this is a player that we've been talking about for years. We need more scoring. We need more scoring. And Rob Blake did his job, and he went out and grabbed Kevin Fiala, and that's exactly what Kevin Fiala brought. He brought more scoring to the point where the Kings put up their first, averaging 3 goals a game in a season for like the first time in like 10 years. So for Fiala to come in, have that kind of year, and for Rob Blake to sign him at the contract he signed for, I mean, we still got 6 more years of this.
Yep.
It's just incredible value at the cap hit he's at. I think it's just barely under around 8. So it's just, I mean, I can't say enough good things about the player, and I'm hoping he comes back healthy, which it sounds like there's no surgery or anything that he's going to be dealing with. So it sounds like he'll be able to come back healthy training camp. Should be interesting to see where he slots in the lineup, because I know he fluctuated up and down, but I'm excited to see what he brings with a little bit more chemistry now. He'll be able to step right in and know the teammates that he's playing with. So it should be fun going forward with Fiala.
I'm glad you mentioned where he slots in, because I think my favorite part about him is he doesn't need a high-end center. He doesn't need Anze Kopitar for him to get his points. He doesn't need Philippe Deneau. He can drive a line as a winger. He's as good as it gets from a winger in terms of 5-on-5 play, and his contributions, both, setting up scoring chances, creating for himself. He's outstanding. So, it sounds kind of crazy, I think, the fact that he played a decent chunk on the third line, really. But man, think about that. When you have Kempe scoring 40 goals on the top line, you have the Deneau line doing what they do. They just buzz all over the ice, and they kind of chip in across the board. You got a guy like Kevin Fiala on your third line who could be a point-a-game player. It just adds such a different element and a dimension to this Kings team that they really haven't had in years.
Remember he had that slow start with Kopitar and Kempe. Everybody kind of envisioned him to be there. And then he got placed on a line with Kupari and Grundstrom. Everyone's like, what the hell? And that line was going crazy. And then it was just fun ever since. Yeah.
He can do it. He can do it there. So like it works. Now, again, like you said, I don't know what that means for next season and who he plays with or what line he's on. But boy, he can make it work wherever, really. And I think to be a big time acquisition, to sign the big deal, brand new place, and check all the boxes, meet those expectations, that's pretty impressive. So that's a good shout. It's a tough one because there's so many, and I know that I'm going to bring a couple. Kings Rule mentions Gabe Vilardi, heck of a season from him. Adrian Kempe, Anthony Cazzaro, aka B-Ball 101, mentions him. Yeah, I mean, those are and for two different reasons, right? Because Gabe Velarde was a guy that was he's a question mark to make the roster.
Right.
And Adrian Kempe, the question was, well, can he do it again? Quote unquote. It was his contract year last year. Can he do it again? Well, not only did he do it, he exceeded it. He gets over 40 goals this year. And maybe this is a lame answer, but I'm going to go with Anze Kopitar. It just seems like everybody, maybe not everybody, but it seems like people are really willing to bury him and kind of start to write his obituary.
Mhm.
But here he comes yet again. And I know that I have no idea if that's my mic or what that is, but here he comes again. And I know it was Kevin Fiala that got hurt, so that Fiala probably would have led the team in scoring, but Kopitar leads the team in scoring again. Incredible two-way center yet again, up for another trophy. It's just the guy keeps doing it, and I just have a great appreciation for the consistency, and not just consistency and then, he's a solid player, like consistently, he's a great player. And I think that people seem to take him a bit for granted sometimes. And I don't know that he exceeded my expectations because I just assumed this is what Anze Kopitar is. He's going to continue to do, and he continues to do it year in, year out, yet it somehow flies under the radar for one reason or another. But I'm going to say it's Anze Kopitar. I was just thoroughly impressed. He just continues to do it once again.
I mean, I love the shout out. I thought Kopitar was easily the Kings MVP this year, and it's funny because I remember I wrote an article in November and talking about he had a slow start, and maybe a lot of that was contributed to playing with Fiala, and those two didn't really mesh too well. And then a lot of it was also he just wasn't shooting the puck as much as he had been before. But it's funny is like to go back and look at the comments underneath that article, and it's like I just read a couple of them. It's like someone says it's aging, someone says father time, like the play is catching up to him, and then you kind of go back and look, and I mean he had like one of his best seasons since the time he was nominated for the Hart Trophy. So it's just, I mean, it's unfortunate because we've talked about this countless times with I guess Byfield too. Is where is this team going to be when he's not around anymore? And I hate thinking about that
Yep.
notion because of how important he still is, still so important to this team. And if the Kings didn't have Anze Kopitar on this team next year, I don't even know if they'd make the playoffs. That's how important he is to this team.
Yeah,
So
we talked about it last show about because we're talking about the exit interviews and everybody's asking about the Stanley Cup window. The Kings are entering their window, and it's like, well, are they? Yeah, I guess sort of, but it's really only open as long as Kopitar is playing at this level. Because who's taking his place? Like he again. He's one of these guys like don't take for granted what the Kings have had, and maybe take these because listen. And I've been the first one to say it, like Father Time is going to catch up to him and Doughty. It's going to happen, right? So whether it's, I hope it's not next year, but he's getting to his mid to late 30s. They're both approaching that, so it could conceivably happen any year now. But so enjoy it while it's happening, because there's going to come a time where you're going to miss seeing what he brought for 200 feet for all of these years.
I mean, talk about a player that's lived up to the contract he was signed for. I mean, geez, I can't think of a season. I mean, besides the seasons we're rebuilding, whatever. But I mean, anytime this team has really contended, it's because of the play of Anze Kopitar has been the MVP every year.
Even in the rebuilding years, I felt like, because remember, there was a lot of talk about Doughty and he has the worst contract in the NHL. And I'm not saying that they were wrong. Perhaps his play warranted those discussions. But Kopitar's, I don't remember him being a part of those conversations. He was still playing at a really good level, even in those years. So,
do you think this might be a little controversial, and we haven't really talked about it, but do you think Kopitar should have been a Selke nominee?
I haven't thought a ton about it, to be honest. I didn't expect him to be. Maybe that's just because I'm like, he's got no shot. There's too much buzz around some other guys, and Kopitar is just going to get lost in this shuffle here. So I wasn't really expecting it. Maybe that's not why I'm like I haven't given it much of a second thought. Do I think he probably could have warranted it? Sure. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think his play was excellent once again, like I said. So, um, but I guess where I'm coming from, I honestly wasn't even expecting it. So,
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. I mean, I went into it like I heard the noise around it, and I didn't really get too frustrated or disappointed by the fact that he wasn't, because I mean, Patrice Bergeron's obviously going to win it, and yeah, he deserves it. He deserves at least the nomination, at least. And then I see a name like Mitch Marner up there, and I'm like, what are we doing here?
you know,
And I, I get Marner's a great player. They lean on the fact that he leads the NHL in takeaways, which is great. But then I see him like in these playoffs, like Sheldon Keefe isn't even putting him out there against Matthew Tkachuk. Like, it's just, I don't know. And this isn't to say like Kopitar should be in there over
right.
Mitch Marner. I actually thought Jordan Staal got snubbed more than Kopitar did, because I thought Stahl's having a great year. So I don't know. It's just, yeah, you want to say East Coast bias, and I know I see you, Davo, mentioning it, East Coast bias, and maybe there is certainly a little bit of that. You know what I'm going to do? This is what I'm going to do, Joe.
Okay.
So the Selke is voted on by the Professional Hockey Writers Association, PHWA.
Okay.
I think it's association. It's not America, so it is association. The PHWA is filled as different chapters scattered across the country. The LA chapter only has a few people, and I think it's like Lisa Dillman, Dennis Bernstein, a couple other people. But you look at like the Toronto chapter, there's like 30 people in that chapter. So I don't want to say, I will say, okay, I'll say it this way. I just wish there was a little bit more of maybe like a regional discrepancy there. So that way you get like more people voting across the regions or so, the time zones that maybe see the games. Because those 30 writers in Toronto aren't staying up to watch Kings
Sure.
games. So I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit to look in there. Maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but I don't know.
The only thing that threw it for me, and why I'll buy into the Toronto, because I don't usually buy into this stuff too much, but I'll buy into it because here's the thing. It's almost always, and you can fact check me on this, or somebody can, it's almost always centers, right, that are in these conversations. So often wingers, because it was always talk about Marian Hossa should have been up for these awards, and he never was because he was a winger. So it's always a center, and usually they're the ones that shoulder the responsibility. So when I saw Marner, like of all wingers, Marner's the one. And listen, looking briefly, okay, at his athletic player card, he graded out really, really well defensively in terms of his goals. The metric that they use, the game score metric that they use, he grades out really well. He grades out not as well as Andre Kopitar, and not and half as good as Gabriel Velarde. So it's like, and again, I know that's not the metric that's being used for this, but it's like, man, of all wingers,
I mean,
it's like,
shouldn't it be though? Like, shouldn't it be the defense? Like, and also like
you would
in
hope
terms
that
of,
it's being, you would hope these metrics are considered. I don't know if they, I don't know. I'm not one of these voters. I don't know, but like, it just seems like, again, I don't mean to say that Marner is not a good defensive player, because clearly he is. Like, again, the
yeah,
metrics suggest that he is, but of all the wingers that usually it's always centers, and usually wingers don't get enough respect. It's like, this is the one that we're going with, and he happens to be in Toronto. So this might be the one time, like, you know what? Yeah, I am buying some of this East Coast Toronto crap.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't want to dig too much into it, but I think it maybe probably should be centers. And then this is just a bigger conversation in terms of the awards in general. I mean, I could make a debate saying that Erik Karlsson isn't even
Yeah,
a top 3 defenseman.
yeah,
He doesn't even kill a penalty on his own team. So I mean, it's just, but yeah, that's a bigger conversation. I guess we're getting a little off
that's okay.
topic here, but
That's okay.
that's all right. That's what we're here
That's all
for.
right. It's a good conversation, which started with talk around an LA Kings forward and Andre Kopitar. And again, Gabe Velarde, again, I think we should give a shout to him too.
Definitely.
So I'll give kind of like and I just feel like the easy one here is Gabe Velarde for the season he had. And I don't want to downplay it, because I love the guy And if you listen to Making It Rain last year with Randon and I, man, I thought this guy, like, I think I even wrote a piece last year. He can get him in LA. He can be a top 6 winger. He could be like a deadline acquisition looking back to last season. His game as a winger changed. He's a different player. And I was just so happy for him that he's had this breakout year. He had this season. And I know it's probably like again, the easy answer, but man, I look at it, just throw a couple of names out here briefly. I look at him and I look at Adrian Kempe because, again, another guy, he signed the deal, right? There's always questions about Kempe. He's streaky. He's this, he's this. And he goes out and he doesn't just score 30. He doesn't score 35. And I remember talking before the season, like, even if he doesn't score 35, I think the contract's going to be good. He could score 28, 29, 30, and the contract's still a good contract. Goes and scores over 40. So those are just two guys, especially with Velarde and with Kempe, for two different reasons, right? One, signing the deal, hitting the expectations. Another one with a breakout. So I don't know if there's anybody else you wanted to bring up from a forward standpoint that stood out, but.
No, yeah, I kind of want to just talk about Velarde and Kempe a little bit more. I mean, for Velarde, it's just, you feel so happy for him
Yep.
too, with everything he had gone through. I remember us sitting here talking about him at the beginning of the year, saying like, "This is it. This is prove it time for him. I mean, make or break time, really." And he made it. Sure enough, to the point where he's most likely going to be looking at a hefty pay raise coming up here, probably around 4.5 mil. We've talked about this, but yeah, I'm so excited to see the future of Gabe Velarde now that it seems like that injury concern is probably in his past. He's had his breakout season. The confidence is there. Obviously, his defensive game has come up, which was really the main reason he had been up and down and put in that McClellan doghouse for a little bit. So to see all that come together, and now to have him come into the season where he doesn't really have to worry about all that outside noise of people like us talking about whether he's going to stay on the team or not, or if he's going to even stay in the NHL. I mean, he's sure enough proven that he's more than capable of being a top 6 forward in the NHL. And I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm just so excited to see what he can bring for another season. And even in the future for the Kings, he's going to be a very important player. This is a future core piece for this team.
No question, and I think we overlook these guys. There's a handful of guys I'm just going to give shouts to because they get a little overlooked because they're just boring is the wrong word, but boy, are they reliable. They're consistent.
I'm surprised you haven't mentioned Blake Lizotte yet. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Me too, actually, and I wasn't even going to mention him next, but because I'm Danault, Arvidsson, Trevor Moore, Iafallo, and I've been an Iafallo guy that's been a little hard on him, not because I dislike the player, but just the fit, the contract, the rest of the roster, etc. But consistent players, reliable players, you can move them around if you need to. I mean, the way that Danault line played in the playoffs, they were buzzing. You look at some of the numbers that Moore and Arvidsson and Danault, frankly, too, were putting up and the scoring chances they were creating and et cetera. Like there was, some of these guys, the Kings have a really good crop of forwards. And I actually really like where they're forward. We'll touch on maybe in a second here what kind of an outlook for next season, what we could see. But I just think that those guys, they have some just solidly reliable guys in the middle 6 that you really do need as kind of like the glue to keep this whole thing together when you got your top horses, right? You got your Kopitars, Kempe, Fiala, but then you've got some younger groups, younger guys that you just don't know, right? Byfield, Kalliev, Velarde. Some are going to make it, some are not. How are they going to play? You need those few guys to just keep this whole thing together. And I really think like the likes of Moore, Danault, Arvidsson, and Iafallo do just a hell of a job of that.
Yeah, I mean, those players like you just mentioned, those are like the glue guys between the bottom 6 and the top 6, right? Like they can kind of mesh right in that middle 6 area, and you know what you're going to get out of them every night. I mean, Iafallo was a little streaky a couple seasons ago, but I thought he was pretty good this year. Kind of got placed in maybe a spot he's a little bit more comfortable in terms of the matchups he'll be going against. But I think he picked it up a little bit in the playoffs, and you're starting to see this kind of leader come out in Iafallo. He's not the most outspoken guy when you talk to him, but you can tell like he's got this leadership quality about him where he's willing to throw it out there on the ice. He's willing to throw it, get in fights, scrap it up a little bit, get in front of the net, and I'm liking what I'm seeing in terms of this growth of IFL, and he's only got 2 more years, and maybe this is a conversation that we have to get into in terms of who knows if a player like IFL or Arvidsson is
Mhm.
even going to be on the team next year,
Yeah,
which is something to think about because of this Kings salary cap situation.
for
But
sure.
yeah, I'm glad I'm especially glad too with what I saw in Trevor Moore. I know a lot of people may be looking for a little bit more production out of him. You gotta remember. I mean, this is a guy who was dealing with a concussion right in the middle of the season, so it's not like he was going. He even had to wear a tinted visor. That's an adjustment itself. So I'm sure he wasn't fully healthy, maybe even just fully back to himself when he came back onto the ice. But then once we started seeing the playoffs roll around, he was probably one of the better Kings forwards. And you kind of look at some of the metrics that are
Yep.
coming out lately. He certainly the metrics kind of, I guess, make that argument for him that he was one of the better forwards in terms of playmaking and shot assists for the Kings. So
Yep.
I'm excited to see what he kind of can develop into once we get another full healthy season under his belt.
I think Moore is a 60-point player coming within the next couple of years. I'm
Oh
going to throw
wow,
that out there.
I like it.
He had a career year a couple of years ago. I think 48 points. Maybe it was last season. Had a career low shooting percentage of below 5% at 5-on-5 this year. Like, I think if he's as impactful as he is in the offensive zone, creating scoring chances, involved in shot contributions, this guy, I think he can hit 60 points, and I think it's there. It's in him.
Are you happy with if like so? Let's say that no, the forwards don't change. Everyone's coming back as it is. Would you be happy with them going back to the nice line with
Yeah.
Moore, Dano, and Arvidsson? Yeah.
The reason I say yes is because I think when you have Kopitar, Kempe, and actually one of the things that, you know what? Let's, okay, Russ, because
I like it. I love this. I love this question.
because, you know, and for those that are not on YouTube, I have on the screen here, it says Kempe, Kopitar, and question mark. Because yes, I would go with the Dano line because they're so good together.
Yeah.
They were the best line in the playoffs for the Kings. So I don't talk as with your hypothetical, no trades, whatever. Yes, I do. And the other reason behind that is I think Fiala, whether he's up with Kopitar and Kempe or whether he's down on the third line, which I kind of like, adding that depth scoring because he doesn't need anybody, really. He doesn't need that elite center to carry it. He can carry a line. He can play with Gabe Vilardi on the third line, or Vilardi can go back up to the first line with Kopitar. So yeah, I would, because I just think they're so good together. And I think there was a little bit less production this season than there was the prior. I think, right? I think that's
Yeah.
accurate.
Yeah.
But like their play, again, there were some injuries dealt with. You mentioned Moore's injury. So guys got jumbled around a little bit. I would, because if those guys are back, I just think they're just such a good line. They just buzz, and but that's partly because I'm a believer. Like, I think there's another production level for Moore. Like, I don't know, he's not going to like consistently be like a 60 to 70 point guy, and that's like who he is. But I think you can see him crack the 50-point barrier, push that 60 points. Like, I think that's in him. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird because with Trevor Moore, I think that next step is in his game too. It's just weird because he's 28 years old, so he's not
Yep.
considered really a young
That's a
player.
good point. Yep.
But you kind of look at a lot of the metrics. This is a player that's always like dead last in goals above expected. He constantly gets his chances, and he just for some reason just can't put the puck in the net. And whether I don't know, I'm not gonna knock his shot or anything like that because I mean I don't know what it is. And you watch him play and you see him create these chances, and maybe he's just had really bad luck these last couple of years. But you see the kind of offensive game that hasn't really been unlocked yet. So yeah, I mean, if the season started, I'm totally fine with the nice line. I wouldn't put Fiala there because I'm with you. I like having that almost like it's like a home run hitter in the bottom part of your lineup in baseball. It's like when you can just roll out that third line with Kevin Fiala on it. I mean, oh my God, like that's where the Kings were really humming along, right? Throughout the year, I think in March at some points. But to kind of answer the question that we have on the screen here of who's going to be playing alongside Kopitar and Kempe next year, on the first line. I think I go with our boy Dave O here, where I'd like to see Gabe Velarde get that spot, and it's tough because I do like what I saw with Velarde, Iafallo, and Fiala, or sorry, Velarde, Lazat, and Fiala, when those three were actually playing pretty well together. But with Gabe, I don't know. Maybe it's just a process of elimination because I don't want to see Byfield back there again. I'd like to see him start as the third line center just because I want to see that development back at that center position to start next year. I want to see that going again because if, like we just talked about with Kopitar, if he's going to be that heir apparent, he needs to start getting that center those center ice minutes. So, and I think a third line center position to start the year isn't too much to ask for in terms of him, especially if he's playing with Fiala, and probably Iafallo if our lineup lines up how we're thinking right now. So with Velarde, with Kopitar and Kempe, I think you might be able to unlock even more in terms of Velarde's offensive production. I think Velarde could easily be a 30-goal scorer in the NHL with the way that he kind of showcased his skill. You get a full season out of him. It seems like he's really gelling on that power play near that position, near the crease, near the net. So, man, I think that'd be a fun, maybe top 9 that we'd be looking at with Kopitar, Velarde, and Kempe, the nice line. And then you have Iafallo, Byfield, and Fiala. Man, sign me up for that.
With Blake, as long as I can fill fourth line,
exactly. As long as you can figure the salary cap, I guess.
Well,
I guess maybe defense is a different story, but the forward group looks pretty good there.
And we'll get into the defense probably in next week's show. But just touching on Velarde up with Kopitar and Kempe, I mean, they played together this year, right?
150 minutes. I was looking it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were really, really good. They were an extremely good line together. And it's funny, I remember looking before the playoffs started, before the series started, and one of the best, might have been the best forward in terms of possession and expected goals that the Kings had against Connor McDavid during the regular season. So listen, I get it. The sample's small, but it's what you have to work with. Gabe Velarde was like the best one. He graded out as well as anybody. And it's just like, just interesting. That line was excellent this season. So I'm with you. For me right now, operating with the hypothetical that we have of the forward group largely returns or fully returns. Yeah, I'm going to go with him because, like you, it's time now that Byfield's got to take a big step next year as a centerman. Yep. So I think, I said last week's show, I think I want him to go and grab that third line center because it's there for the taking. Go get it. So
exactly.
I guess, we did the standout forwards guys that we liked, and I think we'll get into a little bit of some players that we need a little bit more from. And I'm going to throw this one up there. I'm going to throw it to you, Russ. What is Arthur Kaliev? What is he as a player? Where does he fit? Is he somebody to play with Kopitar and Kempe next season? As we sit here on May 11th, the eve of May 11th, what's our outlook here for Arthur Kaliev? How do you think his season went this past year, and then looking ahead into next?
Well, to answer your question of what is Arthur Kaliev, trade bait.
Oh,
okay. I mean, I love Arthur Kaliev. I mean, I saw, or at least I thought I saw a player that had really grown going into development camp last year. Remember development camp last year kind of had like a little bit, I guess, quote unquote, older players come in with, I believe Bjornfoot was there too. Kaliev was there, and he really showed a lot of confidence and poise throughout that entire week. And then he kind of led up all the way up to the season where you saw this more physical player. He started off the year really good, and then unfortunately broke his foot or his ankle or whatever, and then just kind of fell off a little bit. And you just never really saw that same game again. And it's tough because obviously power play is where he's going to excel because the shot he has is just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous shot. But at 5-on-5, it's just, I don't know, it's not there yet. And this isn't me giving up on the player. I mean, because
Yep.
we've obviously seen this progression from players like Kempe and Velarde. But you kind of look at the forward core or this group of forwards that's coming up for the Kings, young forwards and forwards that are already established. And even going into next season, where do you play Kaliev? Like for me, like he's probably not even in the starting lineup opening night. I mean, I'd rather play Rasmus Kupari on the wing over him because Kupari at least gives you a little bit more of a penalty kill aspect over Kaliev, because Kaliev hasn't, I don't even think has ever played on the penalty kill. So for me, I just think if you're gonna try to look to upgrade maybe the left side of the defense, maybe try to tie a prospect to maybe a Cal Peterson deal, I probably look at a player like Arthur Kaliev, because just by the abundance of wingers that the Kings have coming up with Alex Laferriere, Martin Chromiak, we talked about, Francesco Pinelli, who's a center, but maybe can transition left to right. I mean, Akil Thomas is another player that we haven't even mentioned too. There's just an abundance of wingers, and yeah, they're all young. They haven't really established themselves, but that's kind of the same thing with Arthur Kaliev. Yeah, he's scored some goals in the NHL, but that consistency is not there, and I don't know if the Kings can afford to keep playing him in bottom 6 minutes, because that's not really the player that he is. And it seems like it's more of a detriment to his development to keep giving him those minutes than it would be if maybe you try to see if you can find another team that would be willing to take him on, and maybe you get a better piece in return.
I
What do you think?
genuinely think there's a stylistic fit, or not fit, a stylistic just a difference in the way the Kings play versus the way Kaliev is as a player. I think when you get him inside the blue line in the offensive zone, he's dangerous because he's really smart player in terms of like his offensive zone instincts, I would say, and finding some space, getting himself open, getting himself available for a shot. His release is so good that he doesn't need a lot of time. He doesn't need the perfect setup. He doesn't need the perfect pass. So that's what makes him so dangerous in the offensive zone. And I wouldn't even say that in the defensive zone, he's necessarily poor. It's just the total, all three zones, the transition, the back checking, the being able to skate off the rush, make plays off the rush, because that's how the Kings do things a lot of the time. And that's not Arthur Kaliev, right? He's not that type of player. So as long as the Kings are kind of playing this particular way, like I just don't know that he's a great fit for it. He's dangerous on the power play, right? I mean, and I think a player of his offensive brain and his shot is always going to be. Now, you mentioned he took progress last year, took steps, and this year, for a variety of reasons, it just seemed to kind of either plateau or kind of come backwards a little bit. And we've talked about a lot, Rand and I, in the past on Making It Rain, like prospect growth, like you can do this. These kids are still kids.
Linear, yeah.
So, does that mean, like you said, we're not writing Arthur Kaliev off, but when you look at it, and I know you mentioned the guys that are coming up, but just look at the guys up. Like you could conceivably have a fourth line of Lizotte, Grunstrom, and Kupari. Then you still have Anderson Dolan. Like it's capable. Like where does he fit? And I tend to agree with that, Russ. And if we now kind of go to the question of who's out of this forward group, if anybody, but when you consider that there are other needs, right? There's still needs on the blue line. There's needs in goal. So whether you address those via free agency or via trade, there's got to be a body or two that goes out. Now, that could either be in a trade to acquire something of a position. So Kaliev could be a valuable deal for a defenseman, or in a trade for a goalie. Maybe he's a key piece for a goaltender. Or you will see a forward go out to free up money. That wouldn't be Arthur Kaliev. That would be one of Iafallo, Arvidsson, Trevor Moore. Do you think, which one of those do you think is more likely? It's a player like a Kaliev, Or do you think it's somebody with money because the pressing need right now is money?
Yeah, for Kaliev, like you just mentioned, it's going to be for a trade if you're bringing back a better piece in return, like a package deal that you're putting together, or like I talked about with you're trying to tie him to Cal Peterson just to get rid of his salary. Just to kind of finish up on what your notes are on Kaliev too is they picked Zach McEwen over him in the playoffs. Like that should give you kind of a standing of where the Kings feel that where they feel with Kaliev right now. So, and it's tough. Like going into next season too, I'd rather play Jared Anderson-Dolan on the fourth line over him. So, but yeah, let's kind of finish up on Kaliev. But for me, in terms of who's out, it sucks. But I wrote that piece the other day about that tough decisions that Rob Blake will have to make, and for me, the name that comes to mind is Victor Arvidsson. And I hate saying it because he was, for me, probably, besides maybe Kempe, the best Kings forward in the playoff series, maybe even the best Kings player in that playoff series against Edmonton. But you look at the salary cap, you look at capfriendly.com, which is a great website if you guys haven't been there. Capfriendly.com is excellent. Puckpedia2.com is another excellent website. But you look at the salary cap for the Kings and the contracts. Trevor Moore just got a 5-year extension. I don't know how many players get signed to extension and get traded the next summer. I don't see that happen before the contract even kicks in. That contract hasn't even started yet. It's going to start next season. So I don't see. I mean, I've seen people mention Trevor Moore. I definitely don't see that happening. Another name is Alex Iafallo, and yeah, I could see Iafallo being a name, but having that extra year on his deal, that's huge. I mean, length and contract term right now, especially with this flat salary cap, which it'll go up after next season, but that's huge to have right now. I mean, you get rid of a player like Iafallo, I mean, you're gonna have to try to replace him, or even try to sign him next season. Or kind of misplacing my words here a little bit, but yeah, that's a player that you have signed for at least 2 more years. For Arvidsson, he's only signed for 1 more year, and there's a little bit of an injury history here with Arvidsson. He played his most games he had played in his season last year. I think he was close to like 70-something games. But I think with his production and with where his cap hit is at $4 million, around $4 million,
425, I think.
425, yeah. I think you can get a pretty good return for him. And it's not like I'm saying you get like a solid top 4 defenseman in return for him, because I don't think it's like I don't think Arvidsson would be involved in one of those hockey trades where you see like a Ryan Johansson for what was it, Seth Jones, or was it Seth Jones at the time? I think that was the trade, or one of those 1-for-1 trades.
Yeah, but, that's right.
Yeah, so I think for Arvidsson, if you're trying to find some money to move out, Arvidsson would be the player I'd do it. And it's I know people are going to hate it, but man, it's just these are the tough decisions you have to make, because we just talked about all these wingers that we're trying to find spots for. The Kings don't have any left shot defensemen on. They have one. They have one on the sign for next year.
Yes,
Mike Anderson. I mean, Jacob Morvari too, but besides that, that's all they got. So they have to clear out space and clear out room, maybe in other spots, to fill maybe more important holes on the lineup.
I go back and forth on this, whether it's I agree with Moore. Like that would just be weird for them to sign him and then trade
super
him.
Weird, right?
I would be surprised. So I do think if there's money that needs to get moved, and this might be whether they move Cal or whether they don't move Cal, they still might need to move. They really might need to move money anyways. And if it is one of these forwards, I go back and forth with Arvidsson and Iafallo. I have no strong opinion, because I think I can make a case for either one to be traded, and I can make a case for them to stay, because I think what they bring, they both bring things a little bit differently. I was very impressed. I thought the thing I will say is it just depends on what the Kings are going to look to do, because hypothetically, if you deal one of these, say you deal Arvidsson, well, that opens up a spot now. And does that go to Fiala? Do they give that to Kaliev? You know, who slots into that winger spot, right? That's another question. So or you could simply put Iafallo there because he's played that. I think you could do that. I think the thing is, though, I do think that severely limits the production from that second line. Like, I do think Arvidsson is a more offensive contributor to, just from a production standpoint and from a scoring chances standpoint, and just from a lot of the underlying metrics. Just he's just a more impactful player offensively. Like, obviously, Iafallo does a lot.
Yeah, it would certainly hurt your offensive game for sure if you lost
Yeah,
Arvidsson.
so it just, because part of me would love to. I mean, you could try and put Fiala there too, right?
Yeah.
But again, it has a trickle down. That's a dent now in that third line, unless the likes of Byfield takes a significant step and you put Kaliev with Byfield and Velarde and see how that goes. So I just think that they do have some options. I tend to agree that. I don't know what the Kings think. I don't know where they're at with Kaliev right now. So I don't know if he's one that's out. I think if he could net them in a deal of a Marcus Pettersson type of a move for a defenseman, I continue to beat that drum and throw his name out there. But
Yeah, he's not going to date you. You know that?
He might. Pettersson or the like. Type of a deal, or for a goalie, whatever. My guy Thatcher Demko or UC Saros, then maybe something like that would work. But I just think the money is the more pressing thing right now for LA, because you've got two. Some would say, I think you're part of this. Some would say they might. You could argue they got three needs here. Like, obviously goalie right now they have goaltending is a need. Obviously, left D, you just mentioned they have one right now signed. So that's a big deal. Another top four defenseman. Top four defensemen generally don't come cheap. Starting goalie may or may not come cheap. And you could argue, and I know you've made the case, a depth veteran forward wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for the bottom six, for the third or fourth line. So to do all that with the money that they've got, it's hard to see them not shipping one of Iafallo or Arvidsson out just for money purposes. It really is. I mean, because I think moving Cal is going to be really, really difficult. And even if they do, like I said, I think they still might have to move one of those guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in terms of three things that Rob Blake should look to do this summer is do whatever he can to move Cal Peterson's contract. I don't know what that'll take, but it's going to be a lot. It's going to hurt too. That's one. Sean Walker kind of seems like he's kind of out the door. He kind of feels like that too, from hearing from him in his exit interview. And then I think one of those forwards might have to go too, because it's tough. Because even if you moved, let's say you did move Arvidsson, I think Fiala could slot right in that spot. I think those are two maybe comparable players, and maybe you give Kaliev a spot on the third line. Who knows? Or even let's say Alex Turcotte is healthy, and makes an appearance. Same with Fagemo. There's another player who's not going to be, who's not waiver or who's waiver eligible. So he's not exempt from that. So if, let's say you want to send him down, I mean, any team can snatch him right up. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But this is like the article I mentioned. If you guys haven't checked it out, top decisions that Rob Blake's going to have to make. I mean, you kind of look back at the last few summers. I mean, we're talking about like, let's go shopping, like find whatever we can find. What's on sale? Like, oh, the Minnesota Wild are having a sale. Sure enough, hey, let me pluck Kevin Fiala for free. Like, you're not really in that boat anymore. We have to figure out ways to ship some players out, unfortunately, and this is just the flat salary cap era that we're in right now.
Yeah, and I thought your the piece about Cal Peterson in Chicago, we'll touch on that when we get to goaltending and defense probably next week. Let's wrap this up, Russ. We mentioned Kaliev as a forward that we know. What is he? Where does he fit? What are some forwards, Kaliev, I'm sure being one of them, that we got to see more of in 23, 24, whether that's production, whether that's play, whether it's almost like a Velarde this coming into this is like, this is it. It's time to put up or shut up. So who are some of these guys that you've got your eyes on for? We got to see a little bit more out of these guys next season.
I think the big one right off the top of the head is Quentin Byfield, right? I think that's the number one. I mean, I defend him against all the Byfield haters that come my way this past season because I thought he played well. I mean, this is still a kid who's 20 years old, played 50 games, had played 40 games the year before, 50 games this season, only has 99 games under his belt, and obviously is still developing in terms of physical and mental in terms of his game too. So, but we're gonna have to start seeing more because if we mentioned Anze Kopitar, we don't know how much longer he's going to be around, and Byfield needs to take that next step or at least show that he can be that player. I'm not saying that he needs to go out and have a 60-point season, maybe even not even have 50-point season. I just want to see him contribute offensively a little bit more and be a player that when I'm watching the game, when I'm watching Kings games and I see 55 on the ice, I can feel confident knowing that I'm going to get a solid shift, a solid two-way game, maybe win a couple face-offs or so, maybe pitch in maybe with 10, 15 goals in the year and 30 assists. I don't think that's asking too much for a player who's going to be probably, I think he's coming into the last year of his entry-level deal, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look that up. But, I mean, you look at some of these other players that are,
Yes, he is. Yep.
yeah, he is. So maybe it's a player that could be looking at a hefty deal. I mean, we've seen other teams throughout hefty deals already to these young stars like Tim Stützle, Matt
Yep.
Boldy, Dylan Cousins. These are all players who've gotten 8-year deals and have got a hefty payday themselves. So I think I don't want to say it's put up or shut up time for Byfield, but it's a year that a lot of Kings fans might not have as long of a leash as they had this past season, where he deserves that patience, but I think that patience might be wearing thin if he doesn't start producing next year.
Yeah, he's a tough player to kind of evaluate at certain times. I think just because so many people are just going to look at the bottom line numbers, and it's like it leaves you wanting a heck of a lot more. When you look at some of the underlyings, whether it's his scoring chances, his high danger chances, he grades out really, really well. His possession numbers are good. I look at some of the data from all three zones when it comes to his creating chances off assists. He's above average. He's above average in scoring chance assists. Like, not great in those, but he's above average. That's hit. I think people get. I'm done hearing that. They're done listening to the underlying metrics, and I know I'm a believer in them, and because I'm a believer in the process, and if the process is good, I trust the results will come. His process is good. I will trust the results will come. So but I'm on board. Like, at some point, you have to see the production. It is still the NHL. You still have to be a productive player when you're drafted where you were drafted, and the expectation is what it is. So you and I can sit here and say, well, he did well here. He did well here, this possession. He did well creating scoring chances. He did well this, and he did. But at some point, the production just has to come. And maybe that's a lazy way of saying it or looking at it, but I think it's fair. I mean, I think, and people get a little too much. His shot is not great. He's not a shooter. Like,
He's never been a shooter.
I've never looked at him as this goal scorer. I didn't expect him to be a goal scorer. I didn't expect him to be a sniper. So he doesn't have to be a shooter. Can his shot improve? Yes. Do I hope his shot improves? Yes. Do I ever expect him to score 30 goals? Probably not. Like, it's not. If he's a 20 goal and 40 assist guy, I'm on board. That's that type of player works for me too. So people I think are put so much into his shot, and I don't know, like, I just never thought that was a big part of his game necessarily anyway. So I agree though. Go ahead.
No, yeah. The Kings are never had. When was the last time they had a 100-point scorer? I mean, this isn't a team that's not going to relying upon a lot of offensive production from their top players. I mean, Anze Kopitar, we just talked glowingly about his last season. He only had 74 points. Just play a solid two-way game. That's what I'm saying. I just want to be confident when I see that number 55 on the ice, and And I think we can see it a little bit because I did like a lot what I saw with
Yep.
him playing with Kopitar and Kempe for that stretch there. And maybe it was against lesser competition, but that's got to be definitely a confidence booster for his game. And I just wonder what it's going to do for him next season when he's playing maybe with a player like Kevin Fiala or Alex Iafallo a little bit more steadily on the third line. But yeah, I think that patience, it's wearing thin, and there's only so many Tim Stützle comparisons I can take.
Another player that I want to see more of, and I was happy with the progression that he made this season.
Ooh, I hope you're saying the player I'm thinking of.
I want more though offensively, and that's Rasmus Kapari.
Yes.
Okay, so
this is where I wanted to go.
I'm not upset with the season for Kapari,
Yep.
but maybe it's the way I view the player, and credit to him for becoming a guy that was on the penalty kill, and McClellan trusted on the penalty kill, and he played center, played wing, and so there's a lot to his game that really did come a long way. But boy, he is way too skilled, way too talented, way too good of a skater to just there be so little offensive impact. Because here's the thing, and I don't want to listen to him playing on the fourth line, because Blake Lizotte played on the fourth line and created a crap ton of chances in the past. Remember the line that he played on with Kaliev and Lemieux the prior year? They were buzzing at times. So I don't really use that as an excuse. You can still create if you're on the fourth line, because the Kings have some players on the fourth line that can play, i.e. Arthur Kaliev. So I just want to see I'm not mad at the season. I just want to see the next step, progression-wise. I want to see him evolve into a little bit more of an offensive threat, if you will.
I love it. That's you're pretty much taking the words out of my mouth. I loved everything I saw from Kapari, and I'm really glad McClellan found a way to get him on the penalty kill, because yeah, when you have a player of him like him who can skate like the wind, I mean, he's probably one of the better skaters on the team. You have to try to figure out ways to get him on the ice as much as you can. And I mean, we've seen the skill out of him. He has a shot. We've seen it before. He has the transition game is there. It's just not consistent. And I see so much of Adrian Kempe in Rasmus Kupari, and I think a lot of it is also a knock. I don't think he's a center in the National Hockey League. I think he's way more well equipped to play on the wing. I mean, when you give a guy, and this is a topic of conversation we'll have to have. And I know you've brought this up multiple times, and maybe we'll do a full podcast on it of whether that the Kings need to transition to this different kind of play style where they can allow these players that can skate as well as Kupari can to put on a little bit more pressure on the defense of the opponent that they're playing against, because that's what Kupari is. He's not a player who's just going to sit there and have the play come to him. He's going to be on the forefront to be looking to create plays himself. And I don't know, it's tough because like I mentioned, I loved everything I saw from Kupari's game. I mean, he's a great guy in terms of when you talk to him. I mean, he's really positive in the locker room. He takes everything really positively too from the coaching staff, and listens to everything that needs to be said, and all that good stuff. So you like that, but you just want to see that offensive game click a little bit more. And if Byfield switches to that center role where we kind of all expect him to be, I think that maybe force slides Kupari over to the wing on the fourth line with Lizotte. I don't think that'd be a terrible place for him to start off with next season. I think maybe if you got Grunstrom on the other side, or even Kaliev if he's still around, I think that'd be a fun line to watch.
Shoot, I think Lizotte could get a guy like Kupari going. Frankly, yeah. I really do. All this to me, Russ, almost leads us into like if the Kings do got to move on from one of these $4 million forwards, right? How important is Quentin Byfield to this team's success next season? Because if they again go through the season and he just doesn't quite have the consistency, doesn't quite have it, they got to move him off the center position again. Now we're in the same predicament. You got to bump Lizotte up, slot Kupari into 4C. Like, this is a big season. for Byfield, because if Byfield becomes a play driving center and being somebody that can create for his line mates and in the third line, boy, that's a big deal, because then even if he's not at the level, obviously, of Anze Kopitar, but if you've got Kopitar, Danault, and then if you have another center that can create offense from the third line, such a big deal. And we know how important having strength down the middle is, especially in these playoffs. Like, it's such a big deal. So as we kind of wrap up here, Russ, boy, the more I think about it, and the more we have this conversation about the forward group, the more like next season, Byfield's such an important piece to this lineup, because if he struggles as 3C again, it creates some problems.
If he struggles as 3C again, then we might be on the Austin Matthews train in 2024. Because, I mean, that's where the Kings might be at, is maybe looking for a center that can come in and just be that number one center that the Kings might need if Anze Kopitar can't do it as much longer as we hope him to be. But that's the thing, is like for way the Kings are kind of way their lineup sits right now, kind of looked at the playoff like configuration. Like Lizotte, I love the player. He's not a third line center for this
I agree.
team, or even a Stanley Cup contending team. And even for Phil Danault too, like I don't see him being a top 6 center on a Stanley Cup contending team. I see Danault as more of like a Jared Stahl type player. So you slot him on the third line, really solid shutdown guy. You can put him out there in certain situations, but this thing is like he's never really. I mean, he had that breakout season with the Kings the first year last year, but he's not really that. I don't know, like it's just not that top 6 center for me. And this isn't a knock on Danault. I think he's a perfect player that the Kings need. But if you can bring in a player like, or even like if you just get Byfield to just be a little bit more productive offensively, I don't think you need to rely on the nice line to be that juggernaut offensive line that we saw just a season and a half ago, where they were just really humming along. I think you can be that kind of bonus line, because Byfield needs to take that next step. And this is a player that's hanging on this franchise's future, really. I mean, the franchise needs this player to be better. And if he doesn't start showing it soon, especially with Anze Kopitar's contract running out, we'll see what happens. I'm sure he'll be back for a couple more years. But even after that, when Byfield starts turning 23, 24 years old, he needs to be a little bit more established and a little bit more, or show a little bit more confidence in his game and production.
For a team like the Kings, I've said this before, that they're trying to not rush the rebuild, but they kind of had an accelerated rebuild, if you will, because they didn't trade everybody. And you're trying to now be a team that contends, yet you're trying to be a team that's still building in some pretty key pieces, Kalia, Velarde, Byfield. You can't miss. You can't miss on your top picks, because if you need the cheap players on entry-level deals to backfill your roster, and you need them to be productive players. It's one thing if you've got it doesn't even matter if you've got guys making league minimum. If they're playing at league minimum level, then that doesn't help you. You need the guys playing at those contracts 4, 5, 6 timesing their deal in terms of production, in terms of their gameplay, because that is what is going to put you over the top. So you can't miss with these top picks. And not that Byfield is a miss, but like that, you need him to really start to become a productive player and an impactful player at his contract, because that's what's going to help offset, some of these other bigger deals. So it is a big deal. There's no question about it.
It's like in the NFL when you get those rookie quarterbacks that come in and just light the world on fire, then you can just build a solid team around them. I mean, with Byfield, I think just Kings fans are just they're growing impatient. And I don't blame them. I'm getting to the point where you see these players that are drafted so high come in and just light the world on fire. And for some reason, Kings prospects and rookies just take time, a little bit more time than maybe fans would hope for. And I don't know, maybe it's just I'm starting to grow a little bit more impatient too. But it's just so hard when you see a player like Matty Beniers, who's going to probably win the Calder this year. I mean, Mason McTavish is going to be he looks like a great player. He was third overall pick for the Ducks. I think he's even better than Zegras. I think he deserves a lot more hype. It's tough. I mean, you want to see these players come in, step in, and just be immediate producers in the Kings, and we just haven't seen it. Maybe we'll see it with a player like Brant Clark,
Yep.
hopefully. But in the forward group, we're still sitting on our hands here.
We are, Russ. We are, but it's okay. It's only May, so for the Kings, they're not playing right now in the playoffs, and we have a few months to sort all this out. So,
Man, it's weird, right? I mean, we just had the lottery draft, which was excellent, by the way. I'm so happy. Like I love that. Like
yeah,
like I even love the rig talk. I just laugh like to high heavens. Then the fact that the Ducks didn't get it after the they tanked as hard as they could tank, and they still didn't get Connor Bedard. Brings a tear to my eye of joy. I love seeing that, and the fact that he's out of the Pacific Division too. It's excellent.
Yes, that was almost. I mean, it would have been better if he was going to the East, but I will take.
I'll take it. I think it's also good for the league too. Maybe
yeah,
you can find more of an excuse to give them an outdoor game, I guess. But we'll blink our eyes and we'll have the draft is going to be right around the corner.
No question.
Coming up
Absolutely.
Month. I think next month. Yeah.
Yeah, late June it'll be. So I'm sure we'll have some content around some potential draft picks for the LA Kings and some guys that maybe they could target from where they're sitting, not in the first round, but in the rounds following. So, Russ, great job. Want to thank you for joining as always. Everybody,
great job, sir.
Absolutely, thank you, sir. Everybody in the chat. Thank you for hopping in. Like, subscribe. We really appreciate it. If you follow our content, I know Russ has had a few pieces come out lately. I had a piece come out the other day too. Content's getting pumped out from Hockey Royalty. Our Twitter handles are scrolling at the bottom here at hockey_royalty. At Rando Commando 24. Randon McMahon couldn't make it tonight. He's a normal host of the show. He'll be back. Don't you worry. At NHL Russell, at JW Paterino, and at Kopitar 4HOF. That's Kyle Garcia, who handles our Ontario Reign content. Does a heck of a job for us there. So much love to everybody there and the whole Hockey Royalty crew. So everybody, once again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We will be back. We'll do this again next week. We'll talk about the defense and goaltending. I'm sure there's plenty to talk about on the blue line and in the crease. So that should be another fun one for sure. So thank you, everybody, once again for joining in. For our absent Randon McMahon, for Russell Morgan, I'm Joe Paterino. Go, Kings, go.